You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Battista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So, if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your, stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Check Yourself with Marc Sholes. Obsessing, why it happens, and how to get a grip now. Ladies, welcome to the studio. I heard someone say, welcome to my remote studio the other day. And I'm like, my remote studio is always remote since I live in an RV currently. And in my remote studio, I have Marc Sholes. And you guys are going to love this one because he's a board member, faculty, and supervisor at the National Institute for the Psychotherapies, and he's the former co-director of the curriculum for their adult training program in psychoanalysis. That means he trains people in all of the things he's going to be talking about. He also served on the council of the International Association for Psychoanalytic Self-Psychology. He has a private practice in New York City. And right now he's written a book on the relationship between attachment theory, infant research, and self-psychology, and how they help facilitate a shift. You guys are going to love this. From an insecure attachment style to a secure attachment style. And he wrote this book. It's called Reset Your Romantic GPS. He was on a guest on Farnoosh Torabi's podcast, So Money. We love her. Talking about attachment styles in finance. You can hear that on Spotify. You know, I read something on Twitter that said the word of the year was gaslighting. And I feel like the syndrome of the year is attachment style. You know, like I feel like this is what everyone is talking about. And I think your book has come at the exact right time. I want to just thank you, first of all, for taking your time to dive into this work. Is there a particular reason why, of your vast amount of knowledge around psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, that this is what you wanted to write your book about?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a real honor. And, you know, I've been practicing psychoanalyst for 25, 30 years in the city. I see lots of couples, lots of relationship therapy. And, you know, I originally was interested in this topic because of my own issues, you know, in relationships when I was a younger person who spent, you know, many, many years, you know, kind of in the wrong relationships or just not getting out of certain relationships I should have. And then during my practice, I would see people, you know, waste vast amounts of time in relationships that were really not good for people. They could not commit. And so I became interested in attachment theory, which has been something that's been around for a while, but has really kind of exploded on the social scene in the last couple of years.
And so when you think about this idea that it's something that we are like factory installed with, and can it change? Because the reason I'm asking you this question is because I feel like people come in and they've like self-diagnosed, or maybe someone told them what they were, and they sort of make that their identity. And then they live their life from that place, you know, always trying to soothe that part of them. So like, talk to us about like how it gets created and how that can either hurt you or help you and what we can do about it.
Yeah. So let me just give you a quick idea of what how a secure attachment is formed and how an insecure attachment is formed. So you're born into the world, you're an infant, you're quite dysregulated, you're hungry, you have gas, you're disoriented. And when you have an attuned enough parenting milieu who responds to your needs in a good enough way, you begin to have the realization that these sort of existential anxieties that an infant has, somebody is responding to them and somebody is soothing them. And after thousands of relational moments, the infant begins to internalize the sense that the feelings that I have, the world is responding to. And so they become less and less frightened of those feelings. They anticipate that those feelings are acceptable and good enough, and somebody out there is responding to them. And that gets internalized. That sense of safety, that sense of security, that sense that my feelings that I'm having are acceptable. And that becomes like a life jacket. That becomes something that one goes through life with the sense that, I can deal with obstacles, I can deal with stress, because there's a sense that the world is a pretty safe place. So their sense of stability and security is inside of them. And that forms a secure attachment. For an insecure attachment, the infant's born with the same kind of needs, the same kind of dysregulation, longings, hunger, gas, and they are not responded to in attuned enough ways. They're responded to inconsistently. They could be neglected. They could be made to feel that what they're needing is unacceptable. And so the infant and child are left having to regulate their own feelings or to dissociate from those feelings because they're obviously not going to be responded to. And something else happens when there's a lot of inconsistent responsiveness, which is there's a sense of shame that those feelings that one is needing and feeling are not good. There must be a reason. And so they try to then become then preoccupied with the other. So instead of the other being preoccupied with the infant, the child now becomes more preoccupied with how do I stay connected to my parent or caretaker? I must kind of deal with these feelings on my own or get rid of these feelings. And so now what happens for an insecure attachment is the security is outside of themselves. They've never internalized that sense of safety. So now safety exists outside. And so that person becomes much more preoccupied with the other. How do I meet the other's need? What can I do to accommodate the other so the other will love me? Those are two very different ways of being in the world.
So when you're in that sort of unsupportive environment, or like you said, it's not attuned, and that feels familiar then. So then being attracted to or being in relationships that make them unhappy, even if it feels familiar, right? So can you talk about that for a little bit? Because I think it's that really smart listener who's like, I know this. I don't understand why I keep going back to this person, or they've deleted that person's, someone's phone number, blocked them, then they're talking to them again 3 days later. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So that is exactly correct. So one's language for one's language for connectedness is trying to figure out and take care of and be loved by the other. So being loved for the self is not something that person with that attachment style really understands. It's not home. That kind of emotional home becomes what's familiar is being able to kind of take care of the other, to be loved by the other. And of course, often what happens is that that kind of person who needs to be kind of taken care of or who needs to be attended to is usually somebody who's more aloof or more selfish or more, damaged in their own way. And of course, we can't make somebody love us in that way. But we're drawn to it because we're just drawn to connect. And that becomes the language of connection. So one has to first be able to have the confidence to, and first of all, one has to be able to have a relationship with themselves, right? So they have to take the risk that somebody is going to care for them and love them. Then they have to be able to tolerate what does not feel familiar. And often we migrate to what's familiar, even if it's not what's satisfying.
That's like mic drop moment right there, right? Because our brain is recognizing that pattern, right, as familiar. And so we equate that with what love is. And I want to know your take on this, because I think so many of our listeners, love or falling in love is this very like it can be dramatic. It can be like, those conversations where most of your conversations are about your relationship, like I've never felt like, like the drama, right? Or whatever it is, or even butterflies and rainbows, like it's a panacea, or it's paradise. And so when they get with someone that's maybe a more healthy attachment, it feels like boring. And they'll say there's no chemistry. So is that true? Is there no chemistry, or is that just that they are not used to that? Like help us with that.
Yeah, I mean, very strong chemistry can often, not always, but can often come out of a longing. There's something there that you think you can get, or there's something that the other has that feels incredibly intense. Relationships are not really supposed to, they don't fill that intensity. They're not supposed to fill that intensity. And so, yes, I think that we all need a bit of chemistry, but there is a different feeling in a relationship, in a healthy relationship. I mean, you have to be able to live without the belief that there's something out there that's going to make you whole. I mean, you have to be able to live with, in psychoanalysis, believe it or not, the ability to live with that nothing can make you whole is called the depressive position. It's too bad it's called the depressive position, but it means you have to live with the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something everybody can do.
I was like, that seems like that's the realistic position,
right?
The
realistic position. Yeah, that's right.
It's funny. I'm watching this show, Indian Matchmaker. Have you ever seen this or heard of the show?
I have not seen it, but I've wanted to.
Yeah, it's because it's this whole completely counter to American, like right now culture. They're basically like, look, this is a person. It's all about compromise, like, yeah, love will come, but like, you guys just need to get along and have a family and have good values. And it's really, it's an interesting thing, because the mindset at the very beginning, when they're using this approach, is going in for compromise. And I think what happens to us dating and in relationship now, especially if you've had a divorce or a long-term relationship that didn't work, you're into it, you're dating, you're like, hell no, I'm not compromising, right? Like, I want someone to be my everything. And when you're not having that healthy attachment style, that everything can be the opposite of what it is that you really need.
It often is, and it's chemistry. I mean, just going back to chemistry for a moment, it literally becomes a little bit like addiction. It's the same kind of thing. You get that, beep, beep, beep. You feel that pull towards the person. And then you have this moment of intensity. But then for the insecurely attached person, they now want to hold on to that feeling. They're looking to keep that feeling going. And in order to do that, there's a sense of not wanting to lose the other. So then one begins to accommodate again, to try to isolate, not to speak necessarily honestly, or if there are things that they feel ashamed about, they're afraid to bring them into the relationship because they don't want to lose that feeling. And of course, that road is not the road that's going to make a successful relationship. Successful relationship is where you can be yourself and the other person can love you for that, for the good and the bad. And again, that can feel uncomfortable for somebody who is not really in touch with their own value. Their value has been what they can do for the other, not what the other can do for them.
Yeah, I totally I default. In fact, I was just thinking about this morning because we're living in an RV. We've done this big experiment for the last 8 or 9 months. Actually, it's been almost a year. And we're sort of figuring out what our next step is. And I realized, Mark, and I've been doing this work for a long time. I was like, my first thought is still what would make my husband the most happy? Right? It's like that old patterning. Yeah. Is that right? And so I'm like, wait a minute.
You could also be a thoughtful person, but but yes, it's that kind of it's that kind of thing. But it's also, you may have a feeling that you don't feel comfortable expressing because it might push them away. Not you, but somebody.
With someone.
And that's yes, that's what's not expressed. And it's harmful to a person. And for the insecurely attached, they're really not supposed to have the attention on themselves. That's not how they grew up, feeling that, they would feel safe if they were to do that.
Okay. So you call this sort of like your romantic GPS, right? Because in that theory, it's like the direction is set. It's impacting who you're attracted to, who you're not attracted to. So how do you, well, first of all, I love that you're basically saying you can change it, which I think is empowering, right? Like just because you have it.
You can absolutely change it.
Okay, cool. Did y'all hear that? You're like, keep telling your story. I'm anxious. Do you say it like, like your city that you live in? I'm anxious attachment, like, hello, my name is, and I'm right.
Yes.
Okay. So dump that. It's a GPS, but you can change the course just like I can change my navigation and go to another city. So what's the first step in changing your attachment style?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons I wrote this book is to help people just know that there is this thing called an attachment style. It's not a person's fault. It happens in the first 18 months of life. It's not something that they chose. And inherently, it's not a bad thing. It's just a way, it's a language. Unfortunately, it's not a language that helps a person be the best they can be. And it really has nothing to do with their essence. And what I want to help people do is be able to be more of who they are and of their essence. So the first thing is to know that there's this thing, and you can Google it. You can ask people about it. There are ways of learning about attachment theory. You can read my book. There are a lot of books about it.
Yeah.
Then, one of the greatest things you can do is 5 minutes of mindful meditation a day, and people still kind of have a strange reaction to mindful meditation. But it's been so proven to be such a beneficial thing. And what I mean by that is really just sitting for 5 minutes and focusing on your breath and allowing feelings that you're having to notice, let go of those feelings, come back to your breath. And this is a way for insecurely attached people to be with themselves and to notice that they can be with feelings. They don't have to get up and run away from them. They might have a sense of impulsiveness or discomfort, but that discomfort is what we want to invite. For insecurely attached people, the discomfort of a healthy choice is the thing we want to invite. So a little meditation, and then this is not going to be rocket science, exercise. I'll tell you why I tell people to exercise. For the insecurely attached, focusing on the self is not something that, was encouraged. And so a lot of people have a dread around exercise. They feel inertia. They feel exhausted when they think about doing it because it's for themselves only. And those are terrific feelings to be having, to be able to notice those feelings, and then to be able to exercise after that and to feel the accomplishment of that goal. It's all about being with discomfort.
So it's like a way of self-regulating, right? Like, does it help you do that? Both those things help you self-regulate?
Exactly. It's a way of realizing that you have it in you to be able to be that regulator, and that the other doesn't have to be the regulator, but you have it inside of you. That's the most important, and we all do, but we have to be willing to live with a certain amount of discomfort to realize that there's comfort at the other side of that discomfort. The other thing that's completely, all these things are don't cost anything, is food and cravings. And I like to say, be brave, ask why you crave. So when you have a craving, notice the craving. Notice you're in relationship to this food at this moment. Notice that this food is calling the shots. Because, And as you notice that, it doesn't mean don't eat that food. It just means trying to bring a reflex into consciousness. And we have that opportunity daily with food to notice what we're feeling, to notice the relationship to food we're having, and then to be able to make a conscious choice. You might ask, would I feed this to my child? And the answer might be no. So then you think, okay, well, why am I feeding it to myself? All of these kinds of things in our daily life we can do to kind of notice our longings and cravings and be able to make a choice that's for the self.
Yeah. And I keep hearing you talk about in this, that this focus on what am I feeling? What do I need? Making choices, even if you choose to eat the salty potato chips like I just did.
Absolutely.
I was like, oh, I'm really thinking about some deep stuff today, and I'm feeling like some anxiety, and I just worked out and I was like, I want salty chips. Right.
Yeah.
But I had the awareness. It was really interesting. I was like, this is so funny. Like, I know myself. But the bottom line is what you're saying is that's okay, because then you can make a choice and then you can make a different choice. I'm
yes,
real,
it's
people.
not about, yes, that's right. It's really about taking something that's a reflex and then trying to bring it into consciousness. And it's the same thing then with the person. So somebody doesn't call you back for 3 days, and all you want to do is to call them or figure out, or you're obsessing about the person that hasn't called you back, and to be able to notice, boy, I'm really obsessing over someone who's not being very nice to me and not being very thoughtful. And oh boy, I don't, it's so hard for me to be with this feeling. What is this feeling? What is it that I'm having here? Is this person a good person? I mean, literally just be able to take a moment and to move out of the feeling into a kind of, self-reflective state. It makes a tremendous amount of difference.
It's huge, because then you're out of that victim-y, like, why, you're asking, what I hear Mark you saying is you're starting to ask questions that are like empowering questions. You can actually use that information. You might ultimately know the answer versus why didn't he call me? Like, you'll never know unless he actually tells you. So, right. So this is all really important. So I want to make sure we touch on this because we have so many things to talk about. And this was for sure me when I first started doing this work, is if we look at attachment style and you said, like, it happens in the first 18 months, it's not your fault. And whether you have like a great relationship with your parents now, or you don't, or they're deceased, people are like, oh, I don't want to think about this because I don't want to blame my parents, or I already did that work, or, I don't want to bring that up. So let's talk about that. Like, are your parents to blame? Like, should you confront your parents if they're alive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, are they to blame? I mean, they were raised by parents. Look, there are some parents that are really toxic and, and really just downright, neglectful and abusive. But you put those aside. I mean, an attachment style has, there's generational attachment styles. So, we do the best we can. But I mean, if your family is one in which you think that there's room to talk to them about it, I would say yes. I think if there's, if you're going to get met with the same problem that existed early on, which is, you're too sensitive. I don't know what you're talking about. You got it wrong. And it just kind of reinforces, a kind of responsiveness that already caused the issue. I would say no. It's not imperative that one confronts their parents. And are they to blame? We all had a childhood. So yes and no.
I heard once when I did the Hoffman process, and one of the things they said is everyone is guilty and no one is to blame. And I thought
that's lovely.
Isn't that great? Right?
Correct. Yes, yeah. That's great.
And the other thing that I'd love for, since you're this is your expertise, the other thing that I think is interesting is as parents then start to think about this and how they're parenting, right? And so what would happen in like this metaphorical world where you put your baby in the middle of the room and every time it made a noise, you attended to it. My guess is that is also going to cause another unhealthy attachment style.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have been guilty of that as a parent. And yes, that is not the goal either, because of course the child needs to be able to stretch themselves and needs to be able to feel that they can tolerate, certain amounts of attention and certain amounts of discomfort. And the good news is, for parenting, it's just about good enough. It's really about good enough. It's, if a child gets neglected or you don't respond to a child, one time the child's crying too long, that's not what's going to be the problem here. It's really a pattern of misattunement. It's a pattern of non-responsiveness, but good enough responsiveness is really the best you can do.
I love that because, I think that you said that, we don't want to blame or shame ourselves for our attachment style. And that is inherent in that is that there is no perfect way that it could be done. I mean, are there statistics about like how many people are like, I have a healthy attachment style. I never had to go to therapy. I never did. I mean, what's the data on that?
I think there's probably like maybe 3%, I mean, it's
bless
for
those people.
For those people, it's really, look, it's wonderful to have a sense of internal buoyancy. And it doesn't mean that problems don't come and stresses don't come, but they're approached with a sense that the world's not going to come to an end. They're experienced with the sense that this is not going to make me a bad person if I fail this. I can try this. I can fail. That's okay. For a more insecurely attached person, the security is in the moment. There's a kind of impulsiveness since the security isn't inside and it's outside. If you're having an anxious moment, all we want to do is to have that anxiety stop. Mm-hmm. So we'll do whatever we have to do in that moment to make it stop. It doesn't make for the ability to really delay instant gratification for more long-term satisfaction. And that's one thing we want to help people with an insecure attachment with, because, they can't make their best decisions for themselves when they're looking just to soothe an anxiety that they don't feel that they're able to do inside of themselves.
Oh, that's so, that's it right there. I love that. Yeah. So here's my other myth I want to debunk, or you're going to say, no, it's true. Is this something to change your attachment style? Does this take like years and years of therapy? Is it something that you can do once you're aware, like pretty easily if you do those things you were talking about?
Yeah. I think there are people who, when they learn enough about it and they're able to make some, what I like to call the discomfort of healthy choices, experiment with walking away from things that aren't good for you, notice when they're not good for you, experiment with, meditating and exercising and making choices around food that may feel depriving. But, and to be able to live with those feelings and to be able to be kind to those feelings, it's like being a captain of a ship. If you turn the wheel just a little bit, the journey is going to go to a very different place. So we don't need huge changes to change things. We just need a little bit of change to really change the course. And it will become pretty clear to a person if they take a moment to see who's in front of them and to see whether or not the person in front of them is really the kind of person they would want to give their vulnerable part to.
That's so beautiful.
And if it's not, to live with taking care of the self and saying no to somebody like that, it can feel very anxiety producing. But if you can do it, it takes one or two times and you realize that everything is going to be okay. Change can happen without therapy. Change can also, therapy, look, I'm a therapist.
Yeah, I'm a believer.
Yeah. And, I think it facilitates and can be a really, really positive force in one's life. And since COVID, one of the few positive things about COVID is it's put mental health into the foreground, and it's up the anxiety in everybody, and so it's much more acceptable to be seeking out a therapist or to be talking about one's feelings.
I think it's amazing. Like, I can be out with like a couple, and we're talking about like what my therapist said, or, this is why I was anxious, or, my kids are like in their mid-20s, and like all of, they have therapists, and their friends have therapists, and the 20-year-old, right. And I just think it's so great, right? Because we're just saying like, the mythology of the Instagram life is not real, and life is challenging. Yeah. And so how do we learn how to, and what you said, I want to end with this, because this is why, like, you are so my people. You were like, how can we live our life like more fully from our essence, from who we really are? Because those attachment patterns are just patterns. It's really not who we are. So can you kind of end in talking about what does that mean to you to live from essence?
You have the Institute of Living Courageously, right? I am so in line with that sentence, and that the way of thinking about that. People with an insecurely attached, attachment style are incredibly sensitive and empathic, and really great people. And what I want for them is to be able to make the choices that will make them happy and will make them more fulfilled. And so, and that's so in reach. It's so in reach, for them. And it's a goal that they should have.
I love that. So I love you, Marc Sholes.
So sweet.
So you're so amazing. I really appreciate you being here. I just want everyone to really hear like that. Just because you got that, it doesn't mean that that's your destiny. That doesn't mean that you are stuck with it. And it really like when I say I want you to damn life check yourself, as I do at the end of every episode, it's like, if there are people in your life and it feels like you're in a pattern, it feels familiar, but it's not bringing you joy, re-listen to this about 47.3 times, and make notes, and really, really practice those things that Marc Sholes is talking about. And of course, go get his book. The link will be in the show notes. You definitely want to check that out. And also you can go to his website, Marc Sholes, LCSW.com. You're going to have like all these people in Manhattan. They're going to be flooding your inbox. Thank you for being here so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You make it very easy to talk. So I really appreciate that.
Yay. I love it. So ladies, we'll see you next time. But in the meantime, really, seriously, life check yourself. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes, and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Battista, and let's talk soon.